This is Neil Walters with freecsharptutorials.com. I was at a BizTalk interview the other day, and they actually gave me basically a little chunk of C# code that looked kind of like this, and they said, how would you do this? So the question was, how could I get all the odd numbers from this list and return them in this list? So the question was twofold. Number one is basically, did I know how to work with lists and generics, and could I do something simple like find whether or not a number was odd? So let's see if I passed the interview. Basically, I had to hand scratch it on a piece of paper, so there was no IntelliSense or anything. So first thing we have to do is be able to call this routine. So we're going to have to create a list before I can even test it, right? So we have to have some test data up here in my main program. So I'm going to define, just basically copy this here, and then we'll do num list. So the first trick is you got to know how to add items to a list. So let's say we add 5. Then we can just copy this line a few times. So let's add 5, 6, 7, 20, 21, 22, 23, something like that. And now we want to call the function here, the subroutine. So we'll say, actually we'll need another list. So here, to return the value, is equal to, and then basically call the function and pass it numList. Let's make this lowercase just to be consistent. Okay, so now in this routine, the first thing we have to do is loop through our list. So we're going to use a for each statement, and you're going to say integer I in num list, the list that you're receiving. And then you're going to take that I, and you need to figure out if it's odd or not. So I think that's one thing I actually kind of messed up. I was thinking when I was doing the interview, I was thinking I divided by 2, and then that would be either odd, it would be either 1 or 0, but obviously that wasn't quite correct. So I could divide it by 2 and leave it an integer, and then I could also say decimal y equals I divided by 2. Now if these are equal, if x equal y, if the integer and the decimal are the same, that means it's going to be an even number. So let's just walk through this in our head. If we take 20, 20 divided by 2 is 10, and a decimal would also be 10 or 10.0. If we take 21 divided by 2, I believe what's going to happen is this is going to truncate, and it's going to be 10, and this one's going to be 10.5. And so 10 is not equal to 10.5, therefore it's an odd number. So if it's not equal, then we think we have an odd. And then what we need to do is add it to the list of numbers that we want to send back. So we're going to send back a list here. So how can we add it to a list unless we've created a list? So up here, we're going to create our variable, basically the same as this, except I will use a different variable name. We could use the same variable name, but I think it's kind of confusing to do it that way. So here I'll call return odd number list. And here we're just declaring it with no values. And then right here we'll say return odd number list dot add, and we'll add that odd number, which was I. And then when we're done, we need to actually test our results right here. So what we could also do, there's several ways we could check the results. We could actually write a print routine that would loop through and print them, or we could just right here do a console write line. So returning odd number equals I. Okay, so let's see if we going to get this right. The final thing I'll do is just add it here where they can hit enter at the end. So we'll do press enter to continue to end the program, and then console dot readline. That way I can use the debugger if I need to. So we'll do debug start. This is a console program, so the little command prompt window will pop up. I didn't have a successful compile. So right here we have some little issue. So move the cursor over here. It says the object reference is required for non-static members. Okay, so what we need to do is make this routine here static, because we don't want to create an object from it. Let's build that now. Unassigned variable. Okay, so it says here use of unassigned variable. So what happened is here I declared the variable, but I didn't initialize it or didn't instantiate it. So basically here I need to do this. And we're going to have to do the exact same thing in the method down here, like that. And I think we'll just have one more error now. So, oh, 2 equal signs, that's not good. And here, not all code paths return a value. So when you have a method or a function like this, you need to have a return statement at the bottom of it. So let me open my screen to make it bigger here. So we have our for loop, which ends right here. And sometimes I put comments here so I can keep my parentheses straight. And then right here we need to do a return, whatever the name of our variable list was, which is that. Okay, so this should be the last build. Okay, so it built. Now let's do debug. Ooh, it says press enter to end. So it ran and it didn't return any odd numbers. So it sounds like we definitely have a logic problem somewhere in here. So we're going to turn on the debugger. Sorry, not turn it on, but set a breakpoint right here. I can't hit F9 because that's the hotkey I'm using for my recording software. So I just clicked over here on the left margin, and let's do debug again. Okay, so we got to our breakpoint. Let's look at our first number in the list is 5, which is an odd number. And so here we have 2 and y is 2. So I didn't expect y to be 2. So somehow here this is being treated as a decimal. So what happens if we do put here, okay, let's just do debug end. If we put an m on the end, that tells us that that's a decimal. And then let's cast I to be a decimal. And I'm fairly confident, so I'm going to turn off our debug breakpoint and run it again. When I accidentally abbreviated that, I have to spell out the word decimal. And now you can see we're returning odd numbers 5, 7, 21, and 23. So if we go back and just double check up here, yep, 5, 7, 21, and 23. So I think we have this program working. So what we learned here, just to recap, was a couple of things. Number one is how to declare a list, which is a generic variable. When you see the less than, greater than sign here, this is the data type, which could be one of the built-in data types, or it could be any class that you've defined. So what you have is a list of integers. And you declare that as a new list, and then you can use the add method of that list to add new items to that list. So we added 6 or 7, 8 numbers here, and now we pass the entire list to a method. So you see here how that was done. So this little method receives a list here, and of course when you receive a list you have to give it a variable name. And it returns a list which doesn't have a variable name here in the definition. We have to then declare what we're going to return down here inside our routine. We basically then do our loop, and at the end we return that variable. And so in this loop we're adding the numbers that are actually odd to our variable called return odd number list. And our variable is of type list. It's a list of integers. So that's a brief introduction to how the list works inside of C#. And we'll see you on one of our other videos.